Hello and welcome back to Reading Past Midnight. I'm your host, Ron Rutstein, and today I'm talking about In the Spirit of Crazy Horse by Peter Matthiessen. This is a work of investigative journalism, and it deals with the Sioux Nation, the American government, the FBI, and a man named Leonard Peltier, who became the obsession of the FBI and the Federal Department of Justice, and how blind they can become. This is a great work of investigative journalism, and Peter Matthiessen as a writer is very interesting because he writes novels, he writes short stories, he writes naturalist works, he's got a wonderful book about cranes, and his work is always interesting, and some of it's award-winning, and his fiction is always thought-provoking, and his nonfiction lends to his fiction sometimes. And this is the case. I find that In the Spirit of Crazy Horse influenced parts of Shadow Country, which I'm going to discuss soon, maybe in my next video, maybe the one after that. I'm currently rereading that. I have already finished rereading this. I read parts of this in the 90s. I read parts of this when it was re-released after the FBI and the Justice Department sued Viking Press and Matthiessen, and eventually lost those cases, and the book did come out. This is a story of Native American rights. It's a story of mistreatment of a group of people by the government, by tribes of people by the government. Matthiessen gives you a little bit of a history lesson in the treaties that were signed and broken by the government over and over and over again. And they refer to the, we talk about the Trail of Tears, what we did to the Cherokee and Choctaw and Seminoles in the southeastern U.S. when we basically kicked them off their lands there, where they were living peacefully because we wanted those lands. They were fertile, and they would be great lands for the white people to take over with their slaves. So we kicked them out and sent them all to Oklahoma. Yeah, that's ethnic cleansing. It's genocide. If you ask me, the treatment of the Native Americans by the European Americans is possibly one of the most successful genocides in the history of the world. Entire tribes were wiped out. Some of the bigger tribes survived, but certainly not in any semblance of what they once were. So when I read a book like this, and I read about people like Leonard Peltier, who are trying to reconnect with that past and that past culture and redevelop that spirit, I am very sympathetic. I make no pretense about being able to understand Native American culture beyond what I read in books and in history and in novels, and to understand the mistreatment that they have endured. Yeah, I'm going through a little phase of nonfiction, reading more nonfiction than fiction right now, because I'm trying to understand where the world is, and it's in a pretty fucked up place right now. I had just finished reading At Play in the Fields of the Lord, and decided that I was going to reread Shadow Country. And I felt that I should reread this. Now, I had only read parts of this before. I bought this in the 90s, and I read sections of it to familiarize myself with the story of Leonard Peltier. I decided to reread this because I felt that there's some connection here with Shadow Country, and when I review Shadow Country, I'll get into that. But let's get into into this. This is a brilliant work of investigative journalism. And you learn a lot reading this book. Now, it looks larger than it is. There's a lot of interviews in here. It's about 600 pages, and it is dense. If you like this kind of history, it's quite enjoyable. If you're interested in Native American history, you're going to get a lot from this if you haven't read it yet. If you're familiar with the story of Leonard Peltier in a kind of peripheral sense, as I was, this is going to give you a lot. Now, this only takes the story up to 1990, roughly. And yeah, the man's been in jail for forever. I think he was recently released. So the injustice went on. And there are certain injustices that are not possible to right. The American Indian movement is, or was at the time, a group that Leonard Peltier was part of. And he was in it because he was interested in trying to reconnect and to get the Native American people to reconnect with their roots, the spirituality of where they were, what they were, reconnect with the land, reconnect with the animals, with the spirit that was part of the Native American culture before it was wiped out by European settlers. When you read about him, if you take him out of the propaganda picture and out of what happened in South Dakota, you get a picture of a man who cared deeply about he was a kind man. He wanted to do everything he could to help his people. And that occasionally led to some violence. He was not the terrorist that the FBI portrayed him as. Matthiessen makes a good case for showing that the FBI, that meant, the agents were kind of taken in by their own propaganda to a certain extent. And, when propaganda is out there, it works on everyone. It puts fear into the hearts of everyone on both sides. So one side is scared, the other side is scared. They end up hating each other more than they otherwise would. And it's a situation where nobody can work things out because of this sense of fear, of pervasive fear. In the beginning of the book, Matthiessen gives you a history of the treaties that were made between the Lakota people and the American government. And now they were made and broken by the government, and made and broken by the government, and made and broken by the government. Basically, if the government found anything they wanted on Lakota land, they would just break the treaty and take what they wanted, and then write another treaty, and then diminish the lands that the Lakota had a right to. Then they would take part of the Black Hills and carve giant faces of white people on Native American lands. Mount Rushmore. They would take gold, they would take minerals, and destroy the land while they're mining. The quality of the land was not important to them. It was the mineral wealth underneath the surface that they wanted. And they would take what they wanted and destroy the land in the process, poisoning the people. And we still do this today to a certain extent, and we do it to each other too. So this is it is maybe more horrible what we do to Native Americans and what we've done to Native Americans than what we do to each other. But frankly, if white people stand in the way of white corporations, they're going to be treated pretty much as badly. If you look at areas of Pennsylvania where the fracking industry has not had to adhere to any standards, and they've poisoned plenty of areas where, white people have had to face the consequences. Corporations and don't care about any. Corporations very often run the government. And I know that sounds terrible. I know I'm a horrible person for saying that. But for the most part, they do. The focus of the book is Leonard Peltier. Leonard Peltier became an obsession of the FBI. He was the third person put on trial for the murder of 2 FBI agents. The first 2 were tried in South Dakota, found innocent, basically because there wasn't evidence against them. The evidence that they had was fabricated. Testimonials were fabricated. Witnesses lied under oath. And the judge in the case, who was originally sympathetic to the FBI's case, ended up totally unsympathetic to them and basically reaming their asses for how they handled this case and how unjust. The FBI learned their lesson, and when they tried Leonard Peltier, they moved the trial to North Dakota, to an even friendlier judge and an even friendlier jury pool, and the judge limited the evidence so much that witnesses testified to completely different things than they did in the first trial. And the defense was not allowed to show that this is completely different testimony than they gave under oath before, because that was not part of the timeline of the crime. Any exculpatory evidence was prevented from being shown in the trial. So basically, the jury only saw evidence that the prosecution wanted them to see. The evidence was clearly fabricated, and any evidence that the defense wanted to show was inadmissible in the court. Consequently, he was found guilty. He was found guilty of crime he did not commit, and it's quite possible that he could have been found guilty of other crimes. But they were not interested in that. They had tunnel vision focused on one individual to the extent that they completely ignored evidence and could have gotten the actual perpetrators of the crime. And Matthiessen addresses that towards the latter part of the book. He even interviews one of the guilty parties who says that he is guilty, and that evidence was ignored in appeals. This is a case of institutional prejudice, institutional bias. It's a case of a good man, Leonard Peltier, caught up in a situation where a lot of stuff was beyond his control, and he participated in acts that, maybe he shouldn't have, but it's understandable why he did and how he did so. He was extradited from Canada using fabricated evidence, unlawfully extradited. Matthiessen shows evidence of that very clearly. But one thing Matthiessen does that I think is very important is he does show the human aspect of it. He does interview both sides when he can get someone on the other side to talk to him, which is difficult. He does show an understanding of why some of the agents felt the way they did. He does show a sympathy for the fact that, these people had friends that were killed and were emotionally involved and emotionally committed to finding a guilty party, and became hyper-focused on Leonard Peltier and probably should not have been investigating this because of that. They were emotionally involved. Had there been agents who were not emotionally involved, they might have focused on the evidence and might have led them to the real perpetrators. Tunnel vision, we're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. And there are reasons why we shouldn't be investigating things where we have emotional involvement. It's really hard to stay out of something when you're emotionally invested. Matthiessen gives a good portrait of institutional prejudice and the way the institution uses propaganda to create prejudice on an individual level, and the way that then is manipulated by the FBI and the Department of Justice to get a verdict that they want. How it didn't work in the first two trials and how it was much more successful in the trial of Leonard Peltier. That manipulation of the system is something that still goes on today, and we're seeing a lot more of it right now. Things swing. They swing one way in this country, then they swing the other way, and they never hit a medium. They always go. It's a pendulum. The United States of America is a political pendulum, and it's so hard for us to settle down in the middle, because once we're in the middle, the two extremes start fighting, and then we tend to go back and forth and back and forth. And Matthiessen gives us a nice picture of how that manipulation occurs on a certain level. This is an important book because it shows the way individual emotions affect outcomes on a larger scale. It shows the effect of large-scale emotions on individuals. It shows the effect of individual decision-making. One person makes a decision, and it affects a huge swath of people. It shows the effects of institutional prejudice. It shows the effects of individual and institutional apathy, of not caring at all about other people and their way of life, and helping them to preserve what we so willingly helped to destroy. We lose so much. We lose a richness of heritages. We lose a richness of understanding, of richness of perspective, a narrowing of perspective. This book shows what happens when our perspectives become so narrowed that we focus on retribution, that we focus on profit, and we discard the human, because profit is more important than humanity, than culture. We lose so much. I highly recommend this book. It's a good read. It brings you along. Is it going to change anybody's mind? Probably not. If you're reading this type of book, you're probably reading it because you are already persuaded. If you have no opinion or no understanding, this is a great place to start. If you're looking to understand humanity a little better, you will get that from this. I got some insight from this that I did not have before. And I learned a bit about the manipulation of propaganda and how it affects the both sides of the equation, because you don't think about that. You think about its use against people, but you don't necessarily think about how it affects the other side, the people who are putting out the propaganda, their rationalism, their justification, how it provides that out for them mentally and emotionally. And we need to understand that. We need to understand how that manipulation of fact affects everybody, because we are seeing so much of that today. And with AI, we're going to see so much more. If you made it this far, Thank you for watching. Please hit like and subscribe. Help my channel grow. I'll be doing more and more of this when I do finally retire. And let me know what you think in the comments. I will try and respond to everyone. Sometimes it takes a little time for me to respond. I have 2 channels, and there's a lot more going on in my music channel, Music with Mascots, if you're interested. We live in this world together. We share this world. Please be kind to one another. Treat each other with respect. Even when we disagree, that's not a reason to want to kill each other. We need to find a way through this hatred. We need to find a way through to understanding, to becoming better than we are, to sharing the world, to sharing its resources, to becoming better. Love each other. Treat each other well. Live happy. Read books. Listen to music. Try and stay sane. Be well. Thank you very much.